Back in the 1980s, the original Legend of Zelda was a massive success. People all over were journeying into the world of Hyrule for the very first time and spilling its secrets on the playground, in the break room, in the pub, you name it. We saw a similar thing happen with Breath of the Wild when that released a few years back. People that hadn't touched a video game in years were picking up Switches and playing it just for Breath of the Wild. Heck, I even let my mom borrow a Switch during quarantine, and she just beat Breath of the Wild like a week or two ago. Congrats, Mom! One thing that made Breath of the Wild a little different in comparison to the original Zelda is that it was just a much more fleshed out title, with much more dialogue and an objective tracker that kept track of your current goals. And if you did happen to get lost, you could always consult your map, and usually it would point you in the right direction. However, the original Legend of Zelda was extremely cryptic with its puzzles, mostly due to the limitations of the hardware. And if you didn't have the original manual or map that came with the game, or a sibling or a friend that knew all the tricks and secrets, it could take you forever to actually make any progress. This right here is my original copy of The Legend of Zelda, which my grandma purchased for me at a thrift store way back in the day when I was a kid for $10. There's even still a little residue up there from where I peeled the sticker off. Now, I'm very grateful that this came with the original box, because my child mind freaked out, but unfortunately it did not include the manual, which eventually later in life I realized that it's fairly important to completing the game. Sort of like Star Tropics. Not that cruel, but extremely cryptic. I did, however, eventually get the re-release on Game Boy Advance, which did include a manual, but it was more like a photocopied light version of the manual in comparison. It was black and white, no color, just wasn't as good. And if you ever purchase it on the eShop or the NES Classic, you're not going to have a manual there either. Now, eventually Nintendo did release a tips and tactics guide for the original Legend of Zelda, but this was a mail-in order through Nintendo Power from what I can tell from talking to some folks online, and it also sounds like this might have been sold in stores as well, as it does actually have a barcode on the back. It's a great walkthrough, especially in comparison to the original manual for the game, but it almost feels a little bit too textbook. It does feature some artwork from the original game and from the original manual, and it features lots of maps, but it's just paragraph after paragraph, and it's like the map is fine, but it isn't really that detailed either. It's just fine. And with that being said, for all the times that I've actually purchased this game, I've never actually seen it through to the end. And I know that sounds pretty ridiculous considering that I consider myself a huge Zelda fan, but let's see you try and get through the Lost Woods without any prior knowledge or any help. Then we'll talk. Nowadays, we do have the power of the internet at our disposal, but honestly, playing it with a wiki guide just doesn't feel as fulfilling. It doesn't feel right. If I plan to use a guide as a tool, I want the experience still to be memorable. I don't want it to feel like the guide did all of the work for me, which is probably why I've never honestly finished it. And then I stumbled upon this. Yeah, this is a golden bubble mailer. Inside here is a 100% completely, fully hand-drawn, handwritten guide for the original Legend of Zelda. And I gotta say, the first time I cracked this open, it almost brought me to tears. It's such a cool piece. The best part about this book is, as you would expect, every single piece of art in here is hand-drawn. Every drawing of Link, every enemy, every single map, everything is hand-drawn. And there's also this nice slipcover, which comes off as well. Obviously, that's what slipcovers do. Reading through this adventurer's guide makes it feel like I'm reading through the journal of someone who's already traversed through Hyrule and conquered all of its challenges. Like it's a piece of history, and I'm the person that it got handed to. And it's up to me to go and save the land as well. And Phil even went ahead and drew a little set of bombs on the front there as well. So great, I love it. The first few pages cover the characters, enemies, items, and a brief rundown on how to play the game. The original Legend of Zelda manual had a similar feeling with some of its drawings, but this still feels different. It almost gives new life to the game and its worlds. To be able to see it through this new lens is pretty magical. The rest of the guide then covers the overworld and its dungeons. Each dungeon spread features a map of the dungeon, shows off a few of the monsters you'll find, it might give you a possible route on which way you should go. It also features a pretty detailed picture of the dungeon boss. And seeing these bosses in this sort of detail, each dungeon section is also bridged together with story segments and tips on where you or Link should travel next. At times it feels like you're reading a storybook, the way that Philip has managed to connect together the different sections of the game. And when I first opened up the book, this fell straight out of it. This is a giant map of Hyrule with a nice little like key over here on the side, and it features tons of different locations for you to stop at, like where all the different heart containers are, where you can get the different swords, where fairy fountains are. It's beautiful. I love it. And speaking of maps, the original Legend of Zelda manual and this tips and tactics guide literally recommend for you to draw out your own maps of the dungeons. That's what they want you to do in order to beat the original game. And that's exactly what Philip did, but now he's just sharing his beautiful maps with us, so that way we don't have to spend so much time doing it. So with a tool like this at my disposal, I knew that I had no excuse to dive back into the world of Hyrule, that original vision, and destroy that Prince of Darkness that's been haunting me for all these years. I was going to play the original Legend of Zelda, beginning to end. And I did. I absolutely did it. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. All thanks to this book. The way that Philip was able to easily explain puzzles and routes with the maps didn't make things necessarily easy, but it made the game less frustrating and fun. The final dungeon was still a real challenge, even though I did break out the save states a few times as I played it on my Nintendo Switch. His maps and recommended routes really came in handy though. It felt like he was just hanging out with me behind my shoulder recommending where I should go, like it was my own personal Yoda. The cute little drawings of Link and the enemies made me chuckle way more times than I would have expected. Like this drawing of Link showering himself in rupees. Beautiful. And the grand epic sketch of the entrance to the first dungeon or Link encountering his first fairy fountain helped me feel more immersed in the world. It was nice to see it through this different set of eyes. It all adds to the overall presentation of the guide and makes it stand out from anything else. The original Legend of Zelda isn't the same game that it was in the 80s or the 90s. The world has changed, gamers have changed. Of course, you could go in blind and spend days, weeks drawing up maps of each dungeon, plotting a course and deciphering the clues on your own, but there are so many other games that could be played with that amount of time. However, there is still a great game tucked away in here that's begging to be played, even if you decide to take the walkthrough route like me, which in the year 2020, I highly recommend. So regardless of if you've never played the original Legend of Zelda, or if you got stuck like me, or if you've played it into the ground, I highly recommend you check out this hand-drawn Legend of Zelda guide by Philip Summers. In my opinion, it stands right up there with the Magic Sword as one of the most important pieces of equipment you could have in your inventory. A hand-drawn love letter to the game that started it all. You can purchase a PDF version of the Legend of Zelda hand-drawn game guide starting on June 29th at Hand Drawn Game Guide's website. Philip has also been super generous with it and has set it at a name your price option of $1 or more. So you can literally just give him $1 and get a PDF version of this guide. But you can also give him $20, $30, whatever you like, whatever you think it means to you. But if you're also more of a physical collector like me, Philip is making 100 of these available for the mass market on that same day. And he did say that if it does sell well enough that he would consider printing more, but printing books is expensive, and this is just Philip making these books. So I completely understand only making 100 of them. 100 is still a lot. That's a lot of books. We'll pop a link in the description below if you want to check one of these out for yourself. I am absolutely floored by the level of detail that went into this book. If you're a fan of The Legend of Zelda, or if you want a new way to experience a timeless classic, this is definitely something you should consider. I loved it, and I'm so thankful that I finally gotten to beat this original game. A huge thank you to Philip for sending this book over. It's absolutely one of the coolest things in my collection, and I will appreciate it until the day I die. And then I can pass it off to somebody else who has never played the original Legend of Zelda. Some kid. When I'm having a garage sale someday, he'll come up and, "Hey, Sonny," I'll be the old man with the sword, but I'll have this book instead. So now it's time for me to ask you, have you ever played the original Legend of Zelda? Have you gotten stuck like me? Let us know in the comments below, and let us know what you think you'd like to see Philip work on next. So far, he has done a guide on Contra, on Ninja Gaiden, and this. And honestly, I've never beaten Zelda 2 Adventure of Link either, so Philip, if you'd like to help me out and beat that one too, I would very much appreciate it. I have beaten other Zelda games though. Please, please don't worry. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Zan from Nintendo Life. Stay safe out there, and we will see you next time.